Let's check in with the doc and look at things with a wider lens. Pastor Richards on OMG.
Good morning, Doc.
Good morning.
Morning, Pastor.
Good morning, Daniel. Let me catch my brother. Just ran up the stairs to try to make it in. Did I keep you guys waiting?
4 minutes.
I don't think so, Bing.
To lie to your pastor.
I was downstairs and the ads were playing and I had to run to it. I said, boys, go back. I was dealing with something. I said to the guys, look, it looks like it's going to be my time soon, so I got to run. So I ran up the stairs.
I accept your apologies. It's okay.
Yeah. Okay. Talk to me, Bing. Or you want me to talk to you?
Yes,
over the past couple of days, I've been
please.
talking to you guys.
No,
without much
you need to
interruption.
talk to him. You need to talk to him. Pastor, please. Minister to him.
He will listen.
Dr. Richard, did you hear Commissioner John White? I hope you heard him a while ago.
Yeah. I mean, I started listening and then I had to run. I was dealing with something. Somebody tried to do some stuff, so I had to deal with that, okay?
Daniel is of the opinion that you're going to zero in on what Commissioner John said and that you're going to come in and talk about. You see why it's good to get both sides and this and that and all of that.
Yeah, that's a given. But let me, because I have limited time, let me zero in on something that was different, that has its context in what I have been doing over the past couple of weeks, actually, but I ramped it up last week and I said I'm not going to relent. This whole matter of politicking at the time of election and what we need to be concerned about and fair and impartial, unbiased commentary and assessment and response to all that is taking place in election season. Now, a gentleman called in this morning. I hadn't heard from him in quite some time. MacArthur Young, I think is his name. I inquired about him actually and said, boy, since COVID I haven't heard. I hope he's all right. So it's good to know that he's doing okay. He asked a question about the NMCM, the National Monitoring and Consultative Committee. And it's interesting that he asked that because I was in conversation with someone earlier this morning on the self-same matter relating to the role of the NMCM. And for those who don't know, that in election time, well, not just in election time, but the role is ramped up during election time. By the way, the NMCM, as far as I know, came out of the Grand Beach Accord, I think it was, 2000, when was that now? Around 2000, for the purpose of, primary purpose of monitoring the process, the democratic electoral process. And it's not just national elections, but I think outside of monitoring the elections of 2005, 2010, 2015, they also monitored the, the constitutional review, the referendum. That was 2009. That was also monitored by the NMCM. And from time to time, by the way, let me back up because some people might be wondering, so who sits on the NMCM? The chair, I think last time was Monsignor from the Catholic Church. I say Monsignor. Father Stuart, I think it was.
Monsignor Mike?
Mike, yes. I think that's what was the last 2015. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I think at that time he was chairing. So I think the chair of this NMCM has to be the Christian Council of Churches. Since its original inception in 2000, where it was solely the Christian Council of Churches representing the Christian constituency, it has now broadened to include the Evangelical Association, the SDA Seventh-day Adventists, and Spiritual Baptists. It also has representatives from the National Council of Women. So their views are represented. The youth from National Youth Council, I don't know how functional that is, but in terms of the ideal, that they ought to be a part of it too. Chamber of Commerce, representing business interests. Bar Association, of course, there's some legal implications. So the Bar Association would be a part of this. And, of course, the representative from the political parties. The main, last time, how many were contesting? I think 3 political parties were contesting. And the role of the NMCM, again, broadly speaking, is to monitor the the process, not just the election day, but the process. Let me show you what I mean. Coming out, and again, this is about 20 years they have been doing this, and each year, and it will be done again this year. Each year, the agreement, the accord, the guidelines are tweaked, and the parties are supposed to sign off on them. Whether or not they adhere, and the mechanism for enforcing is a whole different thing altogether. The public might be interested in what sort of things, what sort of decisions, what sort of recommendations would come out of the NMCM. I think one of the most poignant coming out over the 20-year history, this is just my opinion, but one of the most poignant and important coming out was the whole idea of registering voters on the attainment of their 18th birthday. Same like how I pay my license for my vehicle, for my driver's license, right? Every time my birthday roll around. I used to pay it every December. Now, every time my birthday rolls around, I have to go pay it. I think the idea of registering voters at the attainment of their birthday, rather than this bulk of registration taking place at election time, is a significant thing. Because with the volume, as you increase the volume over a compressed period of time, it increases either innocent mistakes, or it allows itself, in the volume, it allows itself an opportunity for exploitation. So one of the things that the NMCM had recommended, and I don't know that it's being followed totally, but that at the attainment of your 18th birthday, that wherever you are, it's your birthday, shortly thereafter, get registered. Again, sometimes you change constituency, so that can happen. But this boom of, and I use that word deliberately, this boom of registration during election time, it is not very helpful. It lends itself to two things that I talked about a couple of days ago as part of politics and leading into election. Voter suppression, and particularly voter booming, which are tools that have been used all over the place. As I have researched, I've seen these things being used all of the time. And so right now, for example, we have this issue. I just heard this morning something coming out of Sion Hill where security, I heard it on this station. So if I'm wrong, I'm blaming you guys. But at least I can say I heard it, okay, that people were forbidden from going into a compound. Then you heard the issue of Ben Exeter. These things are issues related to voter registration. And interestingly, this is a very specific matter that the NMCM has given guidelines on. So that is part and parcel of the work of the NNCM. The NNCM also made another recommendation. This may have been 2015. But I know it was made. I'm not as young as I once was, so sometimes dates slip me. But I think this was 2015, where a very significant recommendation of the NMCM was for the proper training. I'm not saying that electoral and election officials are not trained, but for example, coming out of the last election, and actually this recommendation was made prior to the last election, I think. But coming out of the last election, we see again how relevant this particular recommendation was, because there were some human shortcomings, there were some human errors. Some want to claim that these were motivated human errors. There were some procedural errors. So all of these things highlight the fact that errors are being made, and errors can be reduced by proper training. Training, obviously, and the training procedures would obviously have to be vetted by all of the parties concerned, so that this is not training basically to condition the election officials to run the election in a particular way that favors one party. And then added to that, supplemental to this whole idea of training, which was put forward by the NMCM, was also this whole, they made a point of the early selection of officials. Now, I heard Jerry this morning before I went downstairs, and I'm sure Jerry mentioned something about someone who is going to play a major part in this electoral process, being a new player in the game. And that contravenes, as far as I'm concerned, that contravenes something that the NMCM recommended, that in situations like this, particularly where we are just coming out of a contested election, in the sense contested in court, that you and some of the issues related to that had to do with those who were heading up those who are at the helm of the electoral process. Let me leave it there. It seems to me that a late selection of a key election official does not augur well to avoid these kinds of issues. And the NMCM saw that, not for this election, but saw that even before the last election, and called and recommended the early selection of officials so that they can become au fait with all of the procedures, the representation of the People Act, the nuances of the Representation of the People Act, etc., etc. You can't be pulling in key election officials 2 minutes before game time and say, go in. So there are a bunch of other things. So let me go ahead and say this because my time is up. Let me go ahead and say this. For those who think that the NMCM is not in play and will not be in play in this election, let me assure you. Now, I'm not a part of it, so again, I don't sit on that. So don't think that I'm speaking with insider knowledge. But if I'm to, since they have been commissioned in 2000, they have overseen the 2005 election, the 2009 referendum, the 2010 election, the 2015 election, and in each instance, they have been making, as far as I am concerned, very shrewd and relevant recommendations for guiding the process. And I have no doubt that I could, if it has not already been done, because an election date has not been called, it is close to being done, where they will, again, like they've always done, given their guidelines and recommendations that should guide this particular process. What I expect to see, and this is where I'm speaking for me now, what I expect to see as part of this specific election that will guide this specific process, if it has not been added, should be added, recommendations related to pork barreling. Incidentally, last election, that was one of the complaints that the NMCM received, a very specific complaint about pork barreling. And I think that having been lodged properly in 2015 ought to be addressed ahead of the 2020 election. Also, given the issues related to voter registration, I know that the NMCM have commented on these before, but I expect that they will zero in specifically on voter registration, allowing for the better oversight. As Jerry said this morning, there are certain things that are not prohibited by the representation of the peoples at the RPA. However, even if things are not prohibited, does not necessarily mean that there's prudence in allowing it. So there needs to be some there needs to be some better interpretation of how the Representation of the Peoples Act can be applied in good faith. This is again where the NMCM comes in. And lastly, what I expect that they will address is the use of media, particularly the use of the national broadcasting media that we have here, and fair use of that particular medium. There are many other things that I am sure that they will address: institutional inadequacies, administrative weaknesses, and other things. But these things I am going to lodge, not in a formal way, but I am going to expect that the NMCM will address them. So yes, to Mr. MacArthur, who asked the question, this is a long answer, but I expect that the NMCM will be very active in this upcoming election.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you very much. Catch you tomorrow morning.
Let's check in with the doc and look at things with a wider lens. Pastor Richards on OMG.